I mean, we all struggle with stuff, right? I mean, we might struggle with gossip, and lying, envy, materialism, but none of that stuff is our identity. Not is what it is as it is what we struggle with. As a Christian, our identity is in Jesus. It is my ethics and values and beliefs in Him that define me. That is who I am. But as a Christian, I might struggle with a lot of different stuff. I might struggle with materialism and lying and pornography and gossip. But I don't walk around thinking, oh, by the way, I am the materialist. Please refer to me as materialist. Please think of me as the materialist. My issue is now my identity. Please think of me and refer to me that way. No, we go, I am a Christian, I follow Jesus, and I may have a very real, intense struggle with materialism that I'm working on. And you know what? Maybe over time, as I work on that issue, well, maybe over time, that becomes a less of an issue in my life. Great, that's awesome. But God just wants to know, is it the intention of your heart to walk towards me in holiness with your materialism issues? And the same thing, I think, applies for us sexually. My identity is in Jesus. That is who I am. It's my ethics and values and beliefs in Him that define me. And some people may have a very real struggle, deep, intense struggle with same-sex attractions, but it's not who they are, and it is not their identity. I think if we're going to become safe people for this, for people who are in the church, we need to be able to distinguish the struggle from who they are. Christians, one of their biggest fears is that, you know what, if I tell you what I'm struggling with, your first thought is going to be that I'm gay or homosexual, and that is now going to be my label that you're going to put on me for the rest of my life. And often for the Christian, this is the thing that maybe they despise the most in their life. I mean, they have shame about it, they may have self-hatred about it, and now for that issue to be, you know, my new identity in everyone's eyes, it's no wonder they don't come forward for help or to be known. I mean, think about whatever your big issue is. What's your biggest issue? And how would you like it if the moment you shared that with somebody, they and everyone else is now going to think of you, you are now the, you know, fill in the blank. How willing would you be to share that issue with other people? And yet we do that because our culture has trained us to do that. Our culture has trained us to say, if somebody has attractions for their own gender, that is their identity. They are now gay or homosexual. So when I talk about this, I like to talk about same-sex attractions, because that's what it is, particularly for the Christian. They may have a very real, intense struggle with same-sex attractions, but it's not who they are. It is not their identity. Same-sex attractions has been part of my story, and that was one of my huge fears, is that everyone was going to think I was gay or homosexual, and that was now going to be my label. So I relate to that. So I don't think we need to be in denial. I mean, we can say, you know what, I've got a really intense struggle with same-sex attractions, but it's not who I am. And when I was starting to tell people my story, I had to explain that to people, because it's like, I don't think of myself as gay or homosexual, and please don't refer and confess that identity over me either. Because we've been trained that, so that is often the first thought in our minds. But we need to realize, you know what, their struggle doesn't define them, just like my struggles don't define me. I don't have to deny that I have the struggles, but those struggles don't define me. So I think if we're going to be safe people in the church for people coming for help, we need to be able to separate the struggle from the person. Now, and I just want to admit too, we live in a culture where people are happy to take on that identity, and I'm not out there telling them they shouldn't. You know, if they want to take on that identity and make, you know, their gay lifestyle who they are welcome to do that. But I think it's counterproductive to try to do that for someone who's in the church and a Christian and trying to follow Jesus and trying to walk away from this. It's very hard to walk away from something if you're confessing that over yourself and others are thinking of you and confessing that over you all the time as well. So I think if we're going to become safe people in the church, I think we need to be able to separate the struggle from the identity. So a little bit about my story. I grew up in the church. My grandfather was a preacher. My grandmother, a prayer warrior. She could spend hours every day in prayer. All of my cousins, we have memories of being tortured on our knees for like an hour in prayer at Grandma's house. And then my mother was a prayer warrior. She could spend hours in prayer every day. If I ever have an issue, I would tell her I know she was going to be on her knees praying for me every day. I accepted Christ when I was 6. and it was a true acceptance of Christ. I had an ongoing relationship with him. All the while growing up, I loved him and knew he loved me. And my dad was an elder in my church. However, I grew up hating my dad. I went to Christian schools. So if you looked at my life, you would think, I shouldn't have same-sex attractions, right? I accepted Christ, I'm in a Christian environment, being prayed for all the time. This shouldn't have been a part of my life. And for me, growing up, I had attractions to girls, but then I also had this curiosity and attraction to guys. And I was in my early 20s, and I'd grown up in a very, very protected Christian bubble. And at one point, I met a guy, he was part of my Bible study, became a close friend, and at one point my friend seduced me. And he opened up this door, and I had a hard time shutting that door. We were involved for a few months, and then I shut it. I thought, this is so not God's will for my life. I know what God says about this, it's a sin, and I cannot be doing this. But that had opened up a big door in my life, and my fantasy life was a lot about guys at that point, and I tried to get help. I went to Christian bookstores, scoured the shelves, nothing. I tried to find a Christian counselor in the Yellow Pages that said something about this, nothing. I knew what the Bible said, and I thought, I must be the only Christian who struggles with this because it's an abomination or it's detestable. Why would Christians have this? So I just tried to, I shut it down. I had loads of self-hatred and shame going, mountain of self-hatred and shame. So I compensated for that by trying to be as perfect as possible. 4.0 student, perfect employee. And then I hit my 30s and the internet came out. Yes, there was life before internet. And, I instantly got addicted to porn and chat rooms with guys. I'm like, I need help. Again, nothing in Christian bookstores, still nothing in a Christian bookstore on this. I tried to find a Christian counselor, couldn't find one. So I went to a counselor, and his solution was, stop masturbating, don't look at guys. So after a week, he's like, why are you still here? And after 2 weeks, he's like, so why are you still here? And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I'm as broken as I walked in that first, I get emotional when I tell my story. I was broken as I was that first day I walked in, and I thought there's nothing the Christian world can really do. It's just kind of like white knuckle it on your own. But I had found out about filter programs and accountability stuff, so that stopped the behavior. I got that going on my PC. So, I love God. I, became very involved in ministry. And at one point, I was working in the secular world. I left my job and I took a backpack, traveled the world, came home, and my computer software was corrupting my computer. So I took it off. I was right back on porn. Got other filter programs for it, so the behavior stopped, but I had my midlife crisis. I was 40, and my midlife crisis wasn't, buying a big gold chain and Jaguar. My midlife crisis was, I can't live like this anymore. My midlife crisis was, I love God, and I had prayed. At one point I had thought while I was traveling that, maybe God would heal me if I prayed more. So I increased my prayer life. And then I thought, well, maybe God would heal me if I read the Bible more. So I read through the Bible twice in 2 years. And I'm like, God, what else can I do? I hate that I've got this. I hate myself. I feel like, you hate this big part of me. And I thought, I can't live this way anymore. I feel like, I'm just going to be piling more sin on myself for the next 40 years. And I can't live that way. So I spent like 3 months